Oh, hey guys, I didn't see you there. I was actually just dealing with something pretty important over here. I've actually checked in with a doctor since the last video, and the good news is that my brain cells are slowly coming back. Anyways, while you're already here, I guess I can let you in on a little secret, but you can't tell anybody, okay? So, do you remember that game Elden Ring? You know, that FromSoftware game that was hyped up last year and was supposed to be this amazing crossover between Hidetaka Miyazaki and George R.R. Martin, and all we got was a 2-minute trailer and really haven't heard anything since? Well, FromSoftware sent me an email and they want me to review an early copy of the game. Okay, I can tell by the look in your eye you don't believe me. Okay, allow me just to read you the email they sent me. Hello, dear YouTube gamer. That's a weird way to pronounce my channel name. We are sending you an exclusive early review copy of our totally epic game Elden Ring for you to review to your YouTube audience. Expect the package to arrive soon. Enjoy. Yours at FromSoftware. It's here! Okay, come to Papa. Let's see what we got. Ooh, gonna review it. Wait a minute. This box doesn't have Elden Ring. These are Funyun rings. And inside this box of Funyun rings is... Wait a minute. I don't understand. I got an email and everything. Let's take a look at the email again. I really need to start proofreading these emails. Well, I may have been tricked, but I do have this game here in my possession, so we might as well talk about it. But first, let's have a brief little history lesson for those who are unfamiliar with this game. So, Eternal Ring, a game that sounds like a euphemism for a doomed marriage, was released in the year 2000 as a launch title for the PlayStation 2 and was developed by the beloved FromSoftware and published by AgeTech. Now, if you're like most people, when you think of FromSoftware, you probably think of the obvious, like the Souls series, Bloodborne, Sekiro, Broken Dreams, second guessing if you're actually good at video games, and many Rage compilations. FromSoft really started to nail their style of game around this time and exploded in popularity as a developer with the arrival of the first Dark Souls game in 2011. A game that's vague and intriguing in its story, awe-inspiring with its settings, and unforgiving and brutal in its combat. They solidified their mark in the gaming sphere with this style, and even the word Dark Souls nowadays is used as a moniker when talking about games that are challenging. Maybe even a little too overused. If there's even anything remotely challenging out there, people are more than willing to slap the Dark Souls logo onto it. Outdoors, this is like the Dark Souls of living. Making food, this is like the Dark Souls of effort. Nintendo Switch games, this is like the Dark Souls of... Oh wait a minute, it is Dark Souls. But that just shows how impactful the company's been over the years, even inspiring the style of gameplay into other games that have come out like Code Vein, Neo, Hollow Knight, Blasphemous, and even the recently released Mortal Shell. But where did it all start? Well, FromSoftware has been doing this longer than you might think, and to see where it all began, we're gonna have to go back to the year of 1994. The year I was spawned onto this hell rock, and the only thing I knew how to do was scream. It all began with a little game that released to the PlayStation on December 16th, 1994 called Kingsfield. Kingsfield was a first-person dungeon-crawling RPG where the player would have to make their way through 5 different dungeons and do your typical dungeon-crawling things like collect keys and fight monsters with melee weapons and magic. Unfortunately, time has done it few favors. It looks a little rough around the edges and is probably what old-school RuneScape would look like in a first-person view, but you can't deny that it's interesting to see that this is where they got their start. We then move on to 3 years later where they released Armored Core, a genre I think nobody would see them trying, but weirdly enough paid off. I haven't played the game myself, but essentially you fly around in a mech fighting other mechs, and from what I read, the game has a surprising amount of customizability. The game received favorable reviews, and the series did so well that they wanted to make a whopping 13 games in total. Take that, Call of Duty. They also had a few other popular titles sprinkled in there as well, such as Shadow Tower and Echo Knight. If you've been paying attention to this video so far, you'll start to notice a theme around this time. FromSoft really seemed to love to make games in the first-person perspective. This isn't really a complaint, it's just really interesting to see such a contrast from their modern-day games. So, let's flash forward to the millennia of 2000, where FromSoft had released up to 11 games at this point, and Eternal Ring had finally hit store shelves. So before this review was even created, I didn't even know about this game's existence, and what initially caught my eye and caused me to pick up this game was the cover. Finally, a green mascot for the PlayStation that isn't Shrek. But to really appreciate the box art, we have to look at the back of the box. This game was so confident in how well it would do that it even took a jab at Final Fantasy. Who said fantasies had to be final? Yeah, that's right. F*** you, Final Fantasy 9. Oh god, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it. So, with some history built up and the formalities out of the way, let's take a look at FromSoftware's awkward gangly teenager, Eternal Ring. Just as a disclaimer before we get started, I'll be covering this game as someone who experienced it for the first time and what my initial thoughts and opinions are. I have no history with this game at all, so just keep that in mind as I talk about this, and please don't cancel me on social media. Okay, moving on. The game starts off with some monologue exposition that sets up the plot of the game. We play as Kane Morgan, a young boy who lost his home, called the country of Solstia at a young age, to the aggressive neighboring country called Elden. Being too young to remember all the details and what exactly happened, the only thing he can recall is leaving the island and moving to somewhere new. It also tells the story of how long ago in the country of Hangaria, the elders of the island who were once the acting rulers sent a party of knights to an island called the Island of No Return in search of a ring of eternal power. The current king of Hangaria inquires about this expedition with the elders, but being as secretive as possible, they choose to not tell him anything. Detecting that something's off about this whole situation and worrying about the king's advisor, Gillian Morgan, vouches for his own son to leave for the island and investigate. Oh gee, thanks Dad. I've always wanted to go to an island called the Island of No Return. No, seriously, what kind of father are you? You have a sword, why don't you go? Anyways, we then cut over to a scene of us landing on the island where the sailor advises us to deliver the letter we received from the king before nightfall.
If you're gonna deliver that letter, you'd be a lot better off doing it before nightfall. You bet I will.
Well, I guess we should be off then. Wait, did you guys hear something? Nah, I think I'm just imagining things. I'm sure this guy will be fine. We then enter a cave and our adventure begins. So off the bat, I'm just going to warn you now. If games like The Legend of Grimrock or dungeon crawler type games aren't your thing, this game won't be for you. The game harkens back to its roots with the Kingsfield-like style where you have to traverse various dungeons, solve puzzles, collect items, and kill enemies from a first-person perspective. I personally don't mind this style of play and believe that it can be fun if done in the right way, but it may not be for everyone. There's also the controls which... oh wait, hang on. What is this? Oh, it's a thumbstick! What is it doing here? So unfortunately, and to my personal opinion, annoyingly, you don't use the thumbsticks to move in this game. Instead, you have to use the D-pad to move in any of the 4 directions, with the front 2 shoulder buttons making you move left and right, and the back 2 shoulder buttons making you look up and down. I'd be more annoyed, but this was a PS2 launch title, so I'm assuming that there are limitations of some kind, but it is a bit disorienting and took me way too long to get used to. Either that, or I'm just dumb and couldn't figure out how to turn them on, which is also a strong possibility. Anyway, after we make it through this cave and slay some murlocs, we then come across a little village. Aw, this is a cute little town. Let's go say hi to some of the locals.
Welcome to this miserable island.
Is it too late to go back home yet? So I mainly blame this part on the era this game came out in and not the game itself, but the characters suffer from that early 2000s voice acting trope where no one knew how to emote like a human, so the line delivery comes out sounding either weird or hilarious.
This island is crawling with monsters. Don't go getting yourself killed now.
That combined with the stilted awkward movements of some characters makes you feel like you've entered some weird uncanny valley.
Did you see that grave over there?
Also, everyone in this village is a dick to you for no reason.
I was expecting more than just a young boy for being the king's favorite.
Yeah, and I expected more than a wannabe Trunks! We then give the king's orders to the assistant captain to let us join their team and help recover the team that went missing in the nearby water temple. The assistant captain of the guard then decides it'd be fun to take my sword away and give me a weapons form to give to another villager only to make me rebuy the exact same sword. You'll be the first to die. Seeing as we're about to start this first dungeon, I should probably elaborate a little bit on how the dungeons work in this game. As is with any old RPG, the dungeons in this game are themed after an element with enemy types to match it. There are dungeons based on water, fire, wind. You pretty much get where I'm going with this. On top of that, each dungeon comes complete with puzzles to solve, items to collect, and really brutal enemies to fight if you're not careful. One thing I can't stress enough about this game is to make sure you're leveled up enough and well equipped enough. Otherwise, you're in for a lot of hurt. And very much in Dark Souls-like fashion, save areas are far and few between, so make sure you're prepared, otherwise it's a whole lot of backtracking for you. There are also bosses at the end of each level as well that are themed after the elements of that level. We got fishmen, a wind dragon, a chicken. Did I skip a page? I wouldn't say the dungeons were anything special or reinvented the wheel per se, but they definitely hit all the marks on the bingo board of feel-good dungeon crawling. I've noticed reading into this that a lot of people did not like the music in this game, but honestly, I like it personally. I think each level had a theme good enough to make it stand out on its own. I don't really know the names of these tracks, but some of my favorites included the boss battle theme and the cave theme. Come on, how is that not catchy? Sure, it's no Oblivion, but it works for what it's going for. Then there's the most important part of this game and what the game's main mechanic centers around. I mean, it's even in the title of the game, come on people. I'm referring to the ring creation system. So as you go level to level, you'll be slaying a lot of enemies that will drop these items called gems. Depending on the type and strength of the enemy will depend on what kind of gem drop you get. So for example, killing a weak water monster will cause them to drop a watery gem, but killing a strong water monster in a later dungeon will get you an upgraded version of that gem called a sea gem. The process pretty much repeats like this, and there's various types of gems you can collect, all ranging in different types and power levels. Now you may be wondering what the point of these gems are. Well, another item you'll find in every dungeon is a magic ring. A regular standard base ring you can use as a blank canvas to fuse these gems onto to create different rings. And every level next to save points will be a mysterious looking platform. If you step on this platform, you'll be transported to this void looking area complete with floating gems and this godlike looking entity. We never find out what its name is or what exactly it is, but I got some major Velvet Room vibes when I came here for the first time.
Welcome to the Velvet Room.
I think for the time it came out, this mechanic was pretty impressive and extensive. With over 100 plus rings to create, there's all kinds of interesting and powerful combinations you can have at your disposal. The game doesn't really point it out, so I had to look it up myself, but essentially the left side represents what element your ring will be, while the right side decides whether your ring will be an attack or assist ring. You can have things ranging from your basic fireball, to slowing down time, to even literally summoning a tornado. I didn't complete the whole list myself, but I will say, it was pretty fun going back to previous dungeons and just grinding for a bit to see what kind of rings I could make. So now that I've covered pretty much all the mechanics of this game, let's get to the main reason I came to love this game. The story. In true FromSoft fashion, they really have a knack for making their stories depressing as fuck. The first bit of story we get is after we beat the first boss in the water temple. We stumble across a key on a pedestal and a talking water dragon emerges.
Are you here in search of...
That's okay, take your time. The dragon is in a noticeably weakened state, but with the energy he has, he tells us we have to search for someone named Lila. Okay, well I guess we have our first objective, but we should probably check on everybody in the Oh god! I leave for 5 minutes and everyone's dead. Then this happens. Then in true villain fashion, he flies away and says the most villain thing ever.
The eternal ring is mine! Mine! Mine!
Well, guess we should bury all of these villagers. It's been a hell of a first day. Well, now that that's done, I guess we should try looking for this Lila person, so let's get going. I won't really bore you with the details, but when you take out some of the dungeons you have to travel in, you'll come to realize the story is a bit short. But then again, this game entirely is short since I beat it in 8 hours. Anyways, the next bit has us travel through a few dungeons when we come across the guy who got bitch slapped by Diet Sephiroth earlier. Surprised to see us still alive, he decides to tell us everything he knows about what the people back in the village were researching. It turns out the people in the village were researching the long-fabled ring of eternal power that was used to destroy the people of Solstia 20 years ago. Not trusting the village leader at the time, the elders from Hungaria sent this guy in to spy on them. The last thing he tells us before he leaves is he spotted Lila earlier running off with a mysterious man in a mask.
Whether you're a knight or a mercenary, your most important mission is to return alive. I wish you luck.
Alright buddy, you survived a villain attack in a cave full of monsters. I'm sure we'll see you later. You got this. Oh. Poor bastard. We then come across a journal that someone left behind that contains some pretty important plot development. The journal entry takes place after the events of the war between Solstia and Elden and chronicles how the last of the Solstians have been turned into dragons. I mean, I could think of a far worse curse. That actually sounds pretty badass. The person writing this journal entry then talks about how they themselves are slowly turning into a dragon, and how what little human consciousness they have left is slowly fading away. And before the final transformation is complete, they plan to end it all before fully turning. At the end of the page, they implore whoever reads this to stop the Eternal Ring once and for all. Look, cheesy voice acting and dated gameplay aside, you can't deny that this is a pretty unique story for the time it came out, and it definitely falls in line with something FromSoft would do. I like this concept a lot. After this level, we then come across our one-winged baddie from earlier, and he says to me what I hear on most first dates.
You disgust me. Die!
Well, we should probably try to get out of this fire level next. Oh, wait a minute. Who's that? Sidon? Man, life after Breath of the Wild hasn't treated you so well. This talking dubstep shark is none other than the king of the Eldanes himself who led the attack on Solsha 20 years ago. He essentially tells us that he's the one that started the invasion at the very beginning of the war, but in an act of retaliation, the last remaining Solshans placed a curse on him that turned him and his assistant into monsters. This is really messed up in a way, especially since King Elden looks like he's halfway transformed into this humanoid dragon creature and that his inevitable fate will soon take form. He asks us for help in finding a cure, but before that happens, plot convenience strikes. Well, that sucks. We then hear a voice call out to us.
Hurry, this way.
Shit, well, I'm not gonna argue with that. It turns out the voice who saved us is none other than Lila herself. She tells us she belongs to a race called the Elysians, who are ancestors to the Solshians and magic users as well. Oh geez, not you again.
Let me. I'll take care of this.
Lila, that's a fire-breathing dragon. What are you gonna do?
Father, it's me, Lila. Please calm down.
Well, this is gonna make for an awkward family reunion. But before we can make our escape with Lila, Father Dearest decides that we don't deserve to live. We then find ourselves in this mysterious-looking labyrinth area that seems to have more to it than meets the eye, but we'll come back to that later. After making our way through another dungeon, we then come across this wounded person who resembles Nemesis named Nell. This is the guy the King of Elden was looking for earlier, who was aiding him in trying to find the cure to revert him back into a human. And I gotta say, he's not looking so hot himself. If we speak with him, he reveals the big twist in the story that the Eternal Ring isn't a ring at all, but a barrier that was cast to contain a powerful entity who cursed the Island of No Return in the first place and turned everyone into dragons and monsters. He warns that the barrier is fading and the entity will soon be released again, and it's up to us to stop it. With his final dying breath, he tells us to seek out Lila, and that we're the only ones who can put a stop to this. When we find Lila's home, you'll notice everything looks destroyed and decrepit, as if some terrible force swept through here and destroyed everything. We finally meet up with her and she finally tells us everything about what's going on. Essentially, long ago, there was a civilization full of powerful magicians called Elysia. One day, the magicians thought it'd be fun to pull a Fullmetal Alchemist and try to create the ultimate being to study its powers. After many sacrifices and failures, they ended up succeeding in their mission and created the ultimate life form known as Solus. And what a name they gave it, because in true human fashion with stories like these, they made a grave miscalculation and created a being that wouldn't die, that destroyed people and leveled cities. Realizing they made a major oops, the magicians banished and held Solus in a cage without time or space and put him in timeout forever. And that cage is known as the Eternal Ring. Then, humanity being humanity, during the war 20 years ago, the Solsians came to the island thinking the Eternal Ring was a ring that would grant them powers. So they released Solus thinking it would help them fight the Kingdom of Elden, but Solus was like, nah fam, get pranked, and turned them all into dragons. Then, in an act of put that thing back where it came from or so help me, another group of magicians placed the barrier on Solus once more. However, it wasn't as powerful as the last barrier, which is why it's been weakening over time. After that explanation, the island begins to shake and Lila runs off to go stop it. Oh, okay. Bye then. Another really cool thing you can find if you look around is if you investigate Lila's room, you'll find a final letter that was written to Lila from her mother. Long story short, it states how since Lila was a child, she had a special gift to calm Solus, and she believes that Lila will be the one to teach Solus why killing people is frowned upon in society. Alright, now that that plot dump is out of the way, we should probably chase after her and make sure she doesn't hurt herself. Oh hey, it's friendly Mr. Water Dragon again. Let's see what he has to say. Very good, her name is Lila. Man, you're getting better at this. Okay. In all seriousness, the Water Dragon uses what little bit of his consciousness he has left to reveal that he's the leader of the Solshians, and he wants us to stop Lila from reaching Solus before it's too late. This next part doesn't really have anything to do with the main story, but I just wanted to briefly talk about it because it really stood out to me and showed me that FromSoft had a way of telling tragic stories, even back then. If you enter the snow level, we encounter this humanoid werewolf creature that still has his humanity intact. He tells us that he's been stuck in this frozen wasteland for 20 years and is so far removed from society that he has no idea what the state of the world is. He talks about how his mother was old when he left, and that he fears that she's no longer around since so much time has passed. Upon completing the level and heading for the exit, he stops us one last time and has this to say.
If you're going back to the mainland, my mother's grave, there must be a grave for the mother of the army's leader. Would you tell her I'm leading a peaceful life? Thank you very much.
This scene right here shows you how many people have been affected by the war, and how one country's foolish mistake cost the lives of so many, and how they can never go back to the life they once knew. It also shows how they've made peace with what they've become, which is both endearing and haunting. But it made me feel good to know at least one person is okay out of this whole thing. Anyways, after we traverse some temples and gain the 4 keys to unlock the secret entrance into the laboratory where Solus is held, We enter inside and are greeted by the floating ring god one last time. This is the last time that you'll be able to create a ring of any kind before the final battle, so I suggest stocking up as much as you can. After we finish creating our final rings, the being reveals to us that he's what remains of the ancient magicians that created Solus in the first place, and that any hope of returning any semblance of humanity to Solus is far too late. Well, that's promising. With rings in hand, it's finally time to put a stop to this whole thing. Before the level starts, a cutscene plays where Lila is trying to help Solus understand why killing is bad and he should feel bad, but Solus decides that this whole thing is boring and could care less. See, this is why I don't want kids. First you create them, then they think destroying humanity is fine. But this level is by far the toughest you'll encounter through the whole game. It has some of the toughest enemies you'll face, along with the layout that makes it really easy to get lost in. It's not worth fighting every single enemy in my opinion, so I just booked it and ran past every enemy I came across. I tried putting up a fight a few times, but ended up inevitably dying. Alright guys, we're almost to Lila. We can do this. I can feel it.
No, not yet. The child, he isn't ready. I still have much to teach him.
Well, so much for that. This next part will be by far the most challenging in the game. You have to make your way through 2 boss fights in a row with no saves in between, and if you die, that means you have to go through the level all over again. So just make sure you're stocked up on plenty of magic, health potions, and powerful rings, otherwise you're in for the beatdown of your life. The first boss you fight is this winged demon creature who's reenacting what I do at 3 in the morning with my fridge when I want shredded cheese. His powers are mostly wind-based and pretty easy to dodge if you keep moving. Just keep spamming him with attacks and he should go down easy. After that's over, it's time for the final showdown with Solus.
What happened to Lila?
Yeah, sorry about that, bud, but Lila's busy doing the eternal snooze right now. Realizing that Lila is dead, in a fit of rage breaks the seal cast upon him and the final fight begins. This fight is more annoying than it is hard, mainly because you have thunderbolts, lasers, and floating orbs that are all moving and simultaneously attacking you constantly. But just like the last fight, if you keep circling around him while attacking, he should go down after a while. After the final blow is struck, Solus falls and we finally put an end to all this. A voice then calls out to us to tell us our job here is done. Well, that's good enough for me. Wait till I tell my dad that I slayed a god. This final cutscene is by far the saddest in the entire game. Eventually, Solus regains his consciousness but realizes that his powers are gone. Curious as to why, he decides to ask Lila to figure out what's going on. He looks over her body and calls out to her over and over, just assuming she's sleeping, not understanding that the only person in the world who tried to help him is now dead. Solus finally comes to terms with his emotions and allows himself to feel sadness for the first time ever. He then transforms into this adult version of himself and picks up Lila, coming to terms with her death. We then return home to our island to report to the king that the whole research team had been killed and that unfortunately nobody made it out alive. Kane then leaves for a few years, but returns with a stranger King Ian has never seen before. Kane is promoted to the new head advisor, and this stranger was allowed to work for the king until his passing. It's hinted at that this mysterious stranger throughout time never aged, and his appearance always remained the same. And with that, the game comes to a close. I've seen this game get a lot of hate for how dated and unoriginal it looks, but the thing people have to remember here is that this is a PS2 launch title from a company that wasn't even world-renowned yet. Coming from a place of personal taste, I enjoyed the dungeon crawling-like style, and I think they had enough mechanics to keep it fun and have you keep working towards something. For the time, I also think the ring creation system was very innovative, and the amount of rings and combinations you can create in total is impressive in itself. They definitely had some great ideas going for them that would make any old standard RPG fun for the time. And let me just clarify, this isn't really meant to be an in-depth technical review of the game, but just more of an appreciative look back on a company that would one day blow up and set the bar for challenging games with interesting stories. And the story in this game is very much something that FromSoft would make. Granted, I could see it being downplayed and not taken as seriously due to the awkward voice acting and weird line delivery, but as a whole, the story is definitely unique and I didn't see a lot of the things revealed coming at all. For an old dungeon crawling RPG that came out in 2000, you're alright, Eternal Ring. You're alright. Well, while I may have gotten gypped and didn't get Elden Ring like I wanted, I will say I really did enjoy the time I had with this game, and I recommend it for anybody who just wants to take a neat look into FromSoftware's history. Sure, the gameplay is old and outdated at this point, but if you look beyond those things, I'm willing to bet that you'll find something that you'll enjoy. I mean, hell, someone's gotta collect all those rings. And it certainly isn't gonna be me. You do it. I'm out of here.